It's not every day you find ancient life in amber, let alone an ancient dinosaur.
Yeah.
And this is arguably the best preserved piece of dinosaur ever, seeing that the bones, muscle, skin, and of course the feathers were all preserved nigh exactly as they would be in life. Another observation was made as well, which was about the color, as that too had been preserved, with it having been chestnut brown on top and white on the bottom. And along with the fact that all the meaty parts are preserved, it basically means that you're looking at a real dinosaur tail in all of its glory. Another crazy thing about this specimen was that even the quote-unquote liquid was still inside the dinosaur, and studies on it revealed the presence of ferrous iron, meaning we got dino blood. Imagine you find yourself in the 1800s, and you're no longer whoever you are, but instead an early paleontologist who has just stumbled upon a giant lower jaw and some ferocious-looking teeth. And lo and behold, it's a dinosaur. But you don't know that at the time, as it is the 1800s after all. And the only thing you have to fill in the missing pieces is some guesswork and a smidge of imagination, something which was used quite a bit in the early days. But to be honest, really any time badly preserved and highly fragmented remains are found, it requires a lot of filling in the blanks.
Yeah.
However, once in a while, scientists will come across a specimen so complete, so well preserved, that there really isn't much guessing left for them to do.
Okay, wait. I don't know much about the history of paleontology, but watching the past few videos about fossils, I'm now thinking, one is that, like I said, I feel like we're only scratching the surface of what there were before, right? The second point that I just realized is that how much did human destroy? You know, not just misidentify, but like destroy.
And I always find that the older the specimen, the more wondrous it is, as it essentially unlocks a glimpse into a time in Earth's history that was once thought inaccessible. And a pretty good example of this has to do with the troglodyte. Trilobite. You've probably heard of these guys at least once before, or at least should have, as they used to be among the most successful early life on the planet, being a form of arthropod that yielded at least 22,000 known species. So in other words, more species than freaking birds. And thanks to this diversity, trilobites greatly differed in sizes, location of residence, and traits.
That's
with
a lot
some
of
having been
cockroaches.
predators, others scavengers, others filter feeders, and even some others who were planktivores. And it's believed that this group first appeared during the early Cambrian period about 521 million years ago, which also makes them closer to 1 billion years old than zero, which is pretty crazy. And back then, not even a map of the world would have shared any similarities with the present. So it's kind of remarkable that we even know that trilobites existed. And yet, at the same time, we do not only know this, but also what some of them looked like exactly. As one remarkable discovery from Morocco revealed, a trove of trilobites that might as well have died yesterday, not 500 million years ago.
How?
Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story of Pompeii. It's believed that 500 million years ago, something pretty much identical occurred, as along the coast of Morocco, a giant volcano violently erupted, sending molten lava and heated gas surging into the surrounding ocean, whereupon it interrupted a group of trilobites just minding their own business. They got hit so hard, so fast, by the volcanic material, that they essentially became frozen in time, retaining the impression of their soft tissue and being preserved in full 3D, which is an extreme rarity among trilobites, who are usually preserved flat and smushed. Thus, this 3D element has basically given us models of trilobites that we can touch, feel, and look up and down. Additionally, the flow that smacked these trilobites did so with so much force that it literally shoved hot piping volcanic sludge down their throats.
Ew. Fuck, that's a awful way to go. Wait, I don't think that preserves them, no? I think it left the skeleton only. So are we looking at a cast?
As what this did was completely sketch their digestive tracts.
So
it's
a cast.
And even led to the discovery of brand new trilobite features, including a labrum attached to a hypostome, a slit-like mouth, and a pair of specialized appendages, which were positioned right next to the trilobite's mouth, probably being designed to have aided in moving food into their waiting orifices. And in another first, it wasn't just the trilobites that were preserved by the volcano, but also what was on their shells, seeing that tiny animals, specifically Cambrian brachiopods, were found attached on their outer surfaces and nuts by using their own soft tissue stalks to root themselves into the trilobites. So, a pretty neat find overall, and the feats of trilobites don't even end here, as we have plenty of other amazing fossils that come from them.
That must have cooled down relatively quickly, right? To not destroy the content inside. And also, I don't know what these ancient sea cockroaches are made of, but anything fleshy would have got destroyed. But if it's a shell like chitin, then I don't know how that works. That's interesting.
Notably, 2 specimens belonging to the species Triarthris aotanki were found not only 100% complete, but also in pristine state, thanks to their unique burial conditions. You see, this type of trilobite existed during the Upper Ordovician and lived in various different locations. But in Beecher's trilobite bed of New York, they experienced life or death a bit differently than others of their kind, as here, ancient mud flows were frequent that were highly rich in iron pyrite. And as it so happens, this stuff is pretty good for preservation, and thus leading to our 2 perfectly preserved specimens. Pretty metal, and I mean that literally, no pun intended. And thanks to this quote-unquote solution, not only are the 2 trilobites fully complete, but it has also preserved their gills, antennae, eggs, digestive systems, and their legs in walking position. All finds that alone would be extremely rare.
Yo, that's sick. So, man, how rare are these? Because wouldn't that mean the entire area around this is a fucking gold mine? Like, I feel like in paleontology, it's kind of like that, right? When the environment millions of years ago hit the required condition to actually preserve these creatures, there would be an abundance of these type of evidence surrounding the area, no?
It does probably also help by the sheer fact of how many different species of trilobites, and hence trilobites in general, existed throughout the years.
I don't like
However,
that.
With that said,
fuck me.
You don't need 20,000 plus species to produce some amazing specimens. I mean, just ask the Lystrosaurus, an animal that gets crazier and crazier the more I research it. These little to medium-sized Isonodonts were once Earth's most successful creatures.
Wait, really? A burrower or something? They're kind of cute.
And a rather unlikely ruler of early Triassic Pangea. Now, they sure as heck weren't as diverse as trilobites, but they did have a respectable range across the globe, and were quite capable creatures. With this being so nicely demonstrated by the fact that in certain locations, they accounted for over 95% of all life.
What?
Something we usually don't see. In fact, it's never been seen before or since.
I've never even heard about that.
This is just one interesting tidbit about Lystrosaurus, as they're seemingly great at fossilizing as well. Because as of now, it is a Lystrosaurus individual that holds the title for the oldest mummy of all time. In 2022, researchers stumbled upon a Lystrosaurus body unlike anything they've seen before, which dated back to 250 million years ago. But
wait, are those skins? Or is it mineral pressed on there? Huh? Because it doesn't really look like just skeleton, no? It's covered in something.
It was remarkably well preserved. I mean, I've seen roadkill in worse shape. And this discovery was made in the southern Karoo Basin of South Africa, which today is a semi-arid desert. And it's thought that our specimen in question actually exists thanks to these harsh conditions, with the current hypothesis being that the unfortunate Isonodont was caught out during a severe drought, which caused it to die, wither, and then taking a page from the Egyptians, to mummify. And it was this process that allowed for not only the wrapping, but also the texture of its skin to be preserved. And this also helped reveal some pretty interesting things. Namely, that despite being neither a reptile nor mammal, the Lystrosaurus had skin more like the height of a rhino or hippo, rather than the scales of dinosaurs or reptiles. With other observations being that Lystrosaurus was also hairless and dimpled. These mummies, plus the trilobites I talked about, are often considered ultra-preserved because, among other things, they've retained most, if not all, of their entire bodies.
Yeah.
Although, with that said, you don't need to have everything to count as well-preserved. Sometimes all you need is just one piece of you to age well, which is perhaps best demonstrated by what I would consider to be the craziest pliosaur discovery yet. This discovery was actually made in the UK, not perhaps a place you'd expect, as today, the island is known for its typically cold, rainy weather, and a distinct lack of scary animals, when not including humans, that is. But millions of years ago, during the Jurassic period, it couldn't have been more the opposite, with tropical lush islands being the name of the game, while warm, shallow seas surrounded them, birthing untold amounts of life, including unspeakable predators like the giant hypercarnivorous pliosaurs, who in that time reigned supreme. And in 2022, a remarkable discovery reminded us just of that fact, and of its power, as the team uncovered a massive skull from quite the unusual location, as it was suspended in the face of a cliff, which was a very easy thing for the researchers to tell, as the head was immaculate, being so well preserved that it's touted not only as the best preserved skull of a plesiosaur, but also that of any marine reptile.
It's almost all there.
It also comes in at a whopping 2 meters or 6 feet long, making it also one of the longest Pliosaurus skulls ever found. And the individual belonged to likely would have been more than 10 meters or 33 feet long, and weighed multiple tons. Now, the entire head was there and complete, but what was really striking to the paleontologist and the rest of the world were its teeth. Despite being 150 million years old, they are so well preserved that you could still easily slice your hand on them. And you can also clearly make out multiple of their features, including distinct serrations, cutting edges, and grooves, as those ridges on the grooves were actually designed to unstick the teeth after they had sunken into flesh. So certainly a dire situation for its prey, which would not have been helped by the fact that tests in the skull revealed a bite force that was 2 times greater than that of a large saltwater crocodile. And even looking past the teeth, we can see more amazing preservation that demonstrates the Pliosaurus lethality. Namely, that a CT scan revealed its sensory pits remained intact, showcasing how they would have been connected to a multitude of vessels or nerves in life that would have let the Pliosaur detect pressure changes in the water. But keep your fingers crossed, because while we do remain waiting right now, scientists who worked on the site are adamant that the rest of the Pliosaur skeleton is still somewhere in that cliff as well. So yeah, my fingers are basically about to lose blood flow at this point. Okay, so far I've told you about specific specimens, but what if I told you there is a whole freaking site which is famous precisely because everything in it is so well preserved? Let me introduce you to Lagerstätte. This isn't the name of some fossil formation, but rather a type of sedimentary deposit that is unusual for its high level of preservation, thought to be caused by certain areas having been anoxic, and thus there would have been minimal bacteria, which meant less decaying of dead animals. And so far, across the world, numerous Lagerstätte formations are known, and they span nearly every geological period. However, amongst the legions, there is one that sticks out the most, and is arguably the most famous, plus impressive. For it's among the oldest known Lagerstätten and still beats even the youngest when it comes to quality, made all the more crazy by the fact that most of it is soft-tissued organisms. This is the Burgess Shale from the Canadian Rockies in British Columbia. Like the Trilobites earlier, this place represents Earth over 500 million years ago, 508 million to be precise. And unlike any other Lagerstätten, its preservation style is so unique that it even has its own name, Burgess-type deposit, and has the highest propensity for soft-bodied organisms to be preserved that we know of, including many of the Cambrian's most funky creations. Some of the more cool specimens including the first complete Anomalocaris, a nice imprint of the strange Panarthropoda Elusogenia, and a pristine Otoia, a strange enigmatic worm-like creature that kinda seems like it came straight out of a horror movie, with the level of its preservation allowing us to be uncomfortably familiar with how it would have looked like, as in the shale it's even retained the circular indents all around the body, as well as its unsettling proboscis, plus
alien
fuzzy head. But when I say fuzzy, I don't mean hair, more like fuzzy flesh-like protrusions. These are the most well-known specimens, but of course there were other finds too, and the list is very long. So I selected some of the more impressive ones, in my opinion, which consists of the worm-like Amisquia and its fins, gut trace and full body, and then we have the full body, the armored slug-like Wewaxia, as well as the worm-like precursor of
armored slug
Shale,
sounds
with
cool as
and
fuck.
gut trace. Moving down the line, we also see a bivalved arthropod and its pincers. The primitive arthropod, Burgessia, along with the outline of its actual stomach that was kidney-shaped. And the Stanleycaris, who in one case had its whole head and brain. Yeah, brain. So just take note that across the many specimens and creatures, it's routine for researchers to find fossilized exoskeletons, outlines of muscles and growths, plus the actual gut contents of the creatures. Truly amazing stuff, with often the best preserved Cambrian discoveries actually coming from here.
How? I mean, since they're soft tissue, it looks like they're just hydro-pressed into the rock. But that's insane to think about, that their brain, their gut content preserved that well.
However, Lagerstätten isn't the only kind of fossilization that tends to hold up well, with another process coming straight from the pages of Jurassic Park. And I'm talking about amber. Of course. It has given us some remarkable specimens, including an ancient flea with a plague still inside it, a Cretaceous spider caught mid-attack on a wasp, a whole freaking salamander, and what are undoubtedly the best preserved arthropods ever, which date to 230 million years ago.
Ew, I would not want to see a prehistoric spider. Considering how all the worm, all the soft tissue creature looks like, I'm gonna pass on that, thank you.
In the Triassic. But as cool as these are, I don't think they outcool another immense example of amber preservation that 100% deserves a shout out of its own, as I'm talking about a dino that got stuck in tree goop. Now, dinosaurs as a whole aren't probably what you'd expect to find trapped in amber.
Yeah.
Rather, the mosquitoes that bit them. And yet, one unfortunate dinosaur was very much trapped inside it, or rather, a piece of it. As in 2015, an amber collector found a strange piece within a mine that seemed to him to contain a plant inside. And so he polished the specimen to jewelry level and then took it off to a market to be sold. But, and thankfully, before he got there, he decided to have a scientist take one last peek at it, given its strange nature. And what a great decision that was, as after analysis, it was determined not to be plant material, but rather animal material, and dinosaur at that.
Yeah, adding on to what I said about, people destroying things, people, in the best case scenario, ignoring the evidence. There's also trades like this going on, right? In this case, it was found out to be a rather important piece of evidence, but maybe some of them are still sitting in some guy's collection room or basement or something, you know what I mean?
Because it's not every day you find ancient life in amber, let alone an ancient dinosaur.
Yeah.
And this is arguably the best preserved piece of dinosaur ever, seeing that the bones, muscle, skin, and of course the feathers were all preserved nigh exactly as they would be in life. Which again is seriously impressive considering that the dinosaur in question is believed to have been about 99 million years old. And get this, the owner of the fossil, not an avian dinosaur. In other words, not a bird, but rather a non-avian theropod, just like the T-Rex, which in this case is believed to be a Coelurosaur, to be exact. In other words, while we don't know the exact specifics, we do know that it was a part of the clade which contained all theropods more closely related to birds than carnivores. And we know it definitely wasn't a bird because the vertebrae in the tail were not fused into a rod or pygostyle, as it is seen in modern day birds. And because of this, the tail turned out to be highly flexible and long, while keels of feathers ran down along both sides of it. Another observation was made as well, which was about the color, as that too had been preserved, with it having been chestnut brown on top and white on the bottom. And along with the fact that all the meaty parts are preserved, it basically means that you're looking at a real dinosaur tail in all of its glory. Another crazy thing about this specimen was that even the quote-unquote liquid, or what had been the liquid, was still inside the dinosaur, and studies on it revealed the presence of ferrous iron, meaning we got dino blood. Though, don't get your hopes too high, because on the molecular level, the sample really ain't worth much as far as Jurassic Parking the creature goes. But it is an important find, as it implies the dinosaur was probably still alive when it got trapped by amber, making this also the first and only known case of non-avian dino death by amber. Now, you may be asking yourself, how does the dino get stuck in the first place? And the answer to that has to do with its size, as this Coelurosaur was definitely a little guy, being a juvenile, and it's estimated to have been no bigger than a modern day sparrow. Funny how small things can change the world. And eventually, paleontologists even learned something new about the evolution of birds thanks to this specimen, as its feathers lacked a shaft known as the rachis, which is found in modern avians. Meanwhile, it did possess barbs, meaning that barbs evolved before the rachis did. Neat stuff.
This is gonna sound kind of hypocritical when I just said about, trading these type of stuff, but I wonder how much these things go for on the trade. A real dinosaur tail preserved in an amber too.
But in some ways, they're both actually beaten by something that does have an unfair advantage: permafrost. This is essentially soil or any underground sediment that has been below freezing for at least 2 years.
Oh yeah, didn't we found a mammoth? Like a full specimen with skin, fur, even stomach contents, everything in the permafrost? I wonder how that works. How do you get buried that fast into the permafrost with your stomach contents still there?
With the oldest known permafrost being about 700,000 years old. And in the older frost, scientists have hauled up some pretty crazy things, including the best preserved specimens from the Ice Age. And what from this period was the most iconic animal? Well, you should be saying the woolly mammoth. And thus it should come as no surprise that it's from the permafrost that the best preserved mammoth has ever been
not pre-washed.
A specimen dubbed Yuka. After it was discovered in Siberia in 2010, it was deduced to have been a 39,000-year-old juvenile, placing it in the Upper Paleolithic.
Look at that.
But based off of appearances alone, it could have come from just a few hundred years ago, because Yuka was in amazing condition, having been mummified by the freezing permafrost that ended up preserving her entire body, fur and all. And because of this, we now even have things like a scan of her actual brain, which confirmed that mammoths had typical elephantidae structure, but in Yuka's case lost about 55% of its original volume through the mummification process. And obviously, it's not every day you get your hands on a mammoth brain. And as of now, it's the only intact one ever located. And due to how well Yuka held, we also know that mammoth calves were a blondish red in color, and researchers were even able to extract blood from her body, which was, by the way, liquid.
Wait, what?
Another first in mammoth history. Now, blood alone is crazy, but what scientists did to other sampled cells was truly the true crazy. As in one experiment, the team managed to stimulate her nuclei to perform certain biological activity, which is insane. It honestly gives me some flashbacks to Jurassic Park.
Oh yeah, if that actually works, wouldn't we be able to actually replicate it? Like one-to-one? But yeah, and also, I was gonna say, when you're dealing with these very well preserved carcasses, mummies, like how careful do you have to be? Because I was thinking about it. After hearing, the amber with the bug in it still having the parasite from millions of years ago, I'm just wondering how the standard procedure would be, Would they have to be in a sterilized room or something so that you don't contaminate it, or it contaminates you? Because it sounds like a movie plot, but I don't know.
However, not everything about this specimen is so grand, as Yuka was in fact pretty much a baby at the time of her death, being perhaps no older than 6 years old. Originally, based off of some marks and cuts, it was thought that lions, and yes, Siberia had lions at one point, attacked and killed her, but left the carcass due to freezing conditions. And then this idea was later switched out for humans instead of lions. But now, it's actually believed that violence didn't get her, rather just old Mother Nature, who was especially harsh during the Ice Age. Specifically, while crossing a swamp, we think that Yuka became trapped in the mud and drowned, wherein the cold temperatures of the water and the frozen surroundings ended up mummifying her.
Oh, that would make sense, yeah.
A one-of-a-kind specimen.
Yeah, because, like I said, I feel like, especially in a place where it's so devoided of life, food source, wouldn't that be picked clean the moment they were found by anything carnivore, right?
While Yuka may be the best preserved mammoth of all time, she doesn't keep the title when it comes to the Ice Age in general, and ironically the best preserved Ice Age animal happens to be even older, dating back to 42,000 years ago. But once again, this story takes place in Siberia, where in 2018, a team of mammoth tusk hunters were excavating parts of the Bodogaiga crater, the largest permafrost crater on the entire planet. And while spraying down some mud along its banks, a hunter started to notice something poking out. And given the large amounts of specimens from this area, it was immediately thought to be a piece of an Ice Age animal. But what they did not expect was for this said piece to really be an entire freaking horse that was 100% complete.
That looks like a sheep in those rescue videos that got pulled out of the mud or something. It looks alive.
I'm talking about hooves, fur, and even eyes, all included despite it being over 40,000 years old. And the inside of this horse was arguably even more impressive, as after cutting it open, they discovered not only its digestive tract in perfect condition, but once again, liquid blood, which, given the age of the horse, makes it the oldest liquid blood ever discovered. And along with some red, they also found some yellow,
urine?
If you get my drift, with liquid urine also being extracted. And what scientists were able to do with these liquids, more so the blood, is arguably even more impressive than the experiments ran on Yuka. For they weren't just able to extract DNA, but literally grow tissue from the horse's cell. A step towards bringing this animal back to life, according to the team. And the team has also stated that given its preservation, they will try to clone the creature, albeit admitting that it is still a long shot. Because in case you didn't know, bringing back extinct animals is a bit trickier than one might think.
Yeah.
And yes, I did say extinct. As though this was a horse, this is not a kind you can find anymore, with the specimen belonging to a Lena Horse, or Equus lanensis, a species that once roamed large parts of Siberia, from the late Pleistocene all the way to the recent Holocene, with the youngest specimens being about 5,000 years old. And on average, they were smaller than your typical horse, but they did possess unusually muscular and stocky builds that helped protect them from
because
the brutal
of the cold
in the places they lived, with some estimates even stating that temperatures could have dropped to minus 70 degrees Celsius or minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit. So, in other words, cold enough to freeze the surface of your eye if kept open within 1 minute. Pretty cool, and yes, pun intended. Which also makes it pretty amazing that such a fun-sized and cute-looking creature could be so freaking darn tough. But that's evolution for you. And it's also pretty amazing that we have such well-preserved specimens, such as this horse and all the others that I just talked about. And I can only hope that in the future, there will be even more discoveries, and thus, more to talk about.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, I personally believe that we are not even scratching the surface, even if fossilizing themselves or preservation itself are very rare. I still feel like there's a lot that we haven't discovered. Because think about these fossils from mud, permafrost, whatever. Wouldn't there also be fossils deep in the ocean? We haven't even finished exploring the land. So yeah, that's what I believe. But anyways, the link to the original video will be down in the description. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.